Yuka. Translation. Before giving up this present body, if one is able to tolerate the urges of the material senses and check the force of desire and anger, he is a yogi and is happy in this world. Text 24. Yonta suko natara mas tatantar yotir evaya sayogi brahma nirvanam brahma bhuto digachati. Translation. One whose happiness is within, who is active within, who rejoices within, and is illumined within, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. 16.5. Lavante Brahma Nirvanam Shaya Kshina Kalmasha Chinad Vaibhaya Yatmana Sarva Bhuta Hite Rataha. Translation. One who is beyond duality and doubt, whose mind is engaged within, who is always busy working for the welfare of all sentient beings, and who is free from all sins, achieves liberation in the Supreme. Text 26. Kama Prodha Vimuktanam Yatinam Yatta Chetasam Abhito Brahma Nirvanam Vartate Viditatmanam. Translation. Those who are free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Text 27 through 28. Sparshan kritva bahir bayam chakshush chaivantare bruvaho pranapanau samau kritva nasa bhyantara charinau yatindriya manobudhir munir moksha parayanaha vigatecha bayakrodho Yasara mukta evasam. Translation. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence, the transcendentalist becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. Text 29. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram surdam sarvabhutanam yatvamam shantim richati. Translation. The sages, knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attain peace from the pangs of material miseries. End of chapter, going on to chapter 6, Sankhya Yoga. Text 1. Sri Bhagavan Uvacha Anashrita Karma Phalam Karyam Karma Karotiya Sansanyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na chakriyaha. Translation. The Blessed Lord said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated is in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic, not he who lights no fire and performs no work. Text 2. Yam sanyasam iti prahur yogam tam vidhi pandava nahyasanyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kashchana. Translation. What is called renunciation is the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. For no one can become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. Text 3. Arukshor muner yogam karma karanam uchyate yoga rudhasya tasyaiva shama karanam uchyate. Translation. For one who is a neophyte in the eightfold yoga system, work is said to be the means. And for one who has already attained to yoga, cessation of all material activities is said to be the means. Text 4, final text. Yada hinindriyarteshu na kamas anushajate sarva sankalpa sanyasi yoga rudhastadochite. Translation. A person is said to have attained to yoga when, having renounced all material desires, he neither acts for sense gratification nor engages in fruitive activities. And I'll be looking at the translations and purports by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. And if Maharaj is online and has a comment, we would love that. And if anyone else has any comments online, and of course, if anyone has any corrections or comments in the moment, I think it's better to resolve a correction right then if we can. So we're going so a lot of concepts here, you know. What a powerful text, Bhagavad Gita as it is. There's so much in here. There's so much to unpack. And as we work towards being better people and perfecting ourselves and learning what our role is and learning our role and our role in relation to the Supreme, you know, and so many questions here, so many topics here about specifically these verses. We're talking a lot about anger, controlling the mind, talking about sometimes duality and now in these texts, it looks like 529 and 6:1 were especially quoted by Srila Prabhupada very often. But we will actually start with text 24 and translation. One whose happiness is within, who is active within, who rejoices within and is illumined within, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. Purport. Unless one is able to relish happiness from within, how can one retire from the external engagements meant for deriving superficial happiness? A liberated person enjoys happiness by factual experience. He can, therefore, sit silently at any place and enjoy the activities of life from within. Such a liberated person no longer desires external material happiness. This state is called Brahma Bhuta, attaining which one is assured of going back to Godhead, back to home. Brahma Bhuta. So that can also be, that term can be defined as self-realized. Like he says, such a liberated person no longer desires external material happiness. This state is called Brahma Bhuta, attaining which one is assured of going back to Godhead, back to home. Brahma Bhuta, self-realized. And he says in the purport, if we can't relish happiness from within, how are we going to retire from all these external engagements, this carnival that we've been obsessed with for so long, that that people try to, and we have tried to get happiness from, which is like kind of a funhouse mirror compared to the spiritual world. But if we can relish happiness from within, and happiness and distress, that is one of the secrets. And this verse talks about the pleasure of spiritual realization. And a lot of us find that, in the material world, when we were out there, and we would get happiness from these things. You see people get happiness from a new restaurant that opens up, or something like that. And everyone talks, have you gone to the new place? Have you gone here? And it's a little exciting at first. And then over time, we've found that it really loses its taste. And you kind of see how degraded it is. You get used to it. It's material. And so it loses its taste, kind of like bubblegum. You've heard the term bubblegum pop. It's called bubblegum pop music because it's very sweet at first, but it does lose its flavor pretty quickly. And these restaurants that maybe we used to go to, you go there now and it just reeks of like death and uncleanliness. And you see how over the years it's fallen down. Maybe when the restaurant first came out, it was nice, it was clean, and everyone was excited. But over time, the workers are getting disenfranchised, and over time you lose your taste for some of these things. For some of us that used to eat meat, we've totally lost that taste. And so these places are so unclean. And think about the dumpsters of these places. I used to have to take trash out at a restaurant or something like that, and I used to have to cut frozen chicken and things like that, and my hands would be so cold, and I'd be working with these. Now I'd look back and it's it's just these body parts. It's kind of disgusting, and so we've lost our taste for so many things, and other people still have that taste, but it doesn't mean that they're going to. They will eventually. Doesn't mean that they won't transcend these material tastes of meat eating, intoxication, gambling, illicit sex. And one of the best ways is, we have to show people the face of Lord Krishna. We have to show them what he looks like, and we didn't used to know, and we have to get them to say the name, encourage them to say the names, because if they can see the face and if they can say the names, that's a huge victory. Seeing the face one time and saying the name one time, that's a huge victory. For me, I didn't get there for a long time. And that's very nice. Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tatvataha Tyaktvedeham pranarjan mam neti mam etiso Arjuna. One who knows the nature of my transcendental appearance and activities does not take birth again, but attains my transcendental abode, O Arjuna. Does not, upon leaving this world, take his birth in this material body again, but attains my eternal abode, O Arjuna. Also, Om Apavitra Pavitra Va Sarvashtam Gato Piva Yasmaret Pundarikaksham Savabhantar Suchi. Whether pure or impure, or having passed through the material conditions of life, one who can remember lotus-eyed Krishna becomes externally and internally pure. So, it's our job to kind of to get the whole world to go back to Godhead, to go back to Krishna Loka, to go back to Goloka Vrindavan. We want everyone to go back, and it's our job to encourage everyone to go back and to get everyone to go back. And even more than that, here at the Rupanuga Vedic College, the friends and family of the RVC, it's our job. It's our job actually to get everyone to go back to Godhead. It's a lot. It's a lot on our shoulders, but we can handle it. Krishna isn't giving us any things that are any challenges that are totally beyond us. He's given us these challenges we're facing. He's given us these challenges because he knows we're able to take them. So I was thinking, in 5 or 10 years, I think that's a good goal, just like get everyone back, get everyone to see the face, everyone to have said the name once, in 5 to 10 years, by 2030, I think that's a good goal. And so it's really a lot of fun, and people are very interested in it, actually. There's a book distributor that had some nice things he said about it. Chandrasekhara Swami said, I used to think that they really did not want these books. How could they? They're all mostly Christians, isn't it? And meat eaters to boot. I don't believe that anymore. I have seen too much of the truly spooky nature of Sankirtan. Sankirtan is like watching water flow uphill or watching a table float in the air at a seance. Completely unnatural, downright spooky things go down, but good spooky things, things that blatantly violate every known law of human nature. I do not believe that they do not want books anymore. Now I know there is a heart and there is a key. You either have it or you don't. This is the right time or it isn't. It is up to Krishna, but he will follow you. Huh? Weird. But how to get Krishna to give you the key? Therein lies the rub. By having the perfect attitude. What's in that perfect attitude box? A lot of interesting stuff, like really wanting to help people, like not feeling better than them, like being able to being the butt of a joke, like knowing when to move on to the next person real fast, like having a bag where you store all your daily insults to be thrown away at the end of the day, like good japa, like praying constantly, like realizing how funny we really are. And I'm sure that other Sankirtan devotees can name thousands more items. Every so often, I come across yet another item to put into my perfect, quote, perfect attitude box. So you will find amazing things when you give this out to other people. You will be surprised at who takes it and who doesn't. Recently there was a lady at the Walmart, and she was by herself, and she was kind of covered up. Her face was covered, sunglasses. And I thought, this is not going to work. This is going to be but she was actually very thankful. She said, thank you so much for explaining these things to me. And so some people can be very interested. You just never know. And so even everyone out there in Zoom and YouTube land, give it to everyone. Give it to the people that are interested in spirituality. Give it to the people that are really good at talking to other people. I know one person who, he's one of these people, everything if you say something to him, it's going to probably make its rounds, because he's really good at kind of talking about what's going on. And so give it to these people who are such good talkers and who like to talk to other people, and give it to everybody. So that is verse, that's 24, going on to 25. One who is beyond duality and doubt, whose mind is engaged within, who is always busy working for the welfare of all sentient beings, and who is free from all sins, achieves liberation in the Supreme. From the last part of the purport here, he says, when a man is fully conscious of his relationship with Krishna, he's actually a liberated soul, although he may be in the material tabernacle. I love that term, material tabernacle, which can mean like a place of dwelling, a large building or tent. But it can also a lot of times mean it has a spiritual connotation. And 24 and 25, if you put them together, one whose happiness is within, one who is active within, who rejoices within and is illumined within, is actually the perfect mystic. He's liberated in Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme. One who is beyond duality and doubt, whose mind is engaged within, who is always busy working for the welfare of all sentient beings, and who is free from all sins, achieves liberation in the Supreme. So it seems a little difficult when you put it together like that, but that's why Srila Prabhupada says ultimately, and Krishna subsides some of those feelings too in the next verse. And sometimes we talk about duality, and that can be a little confusing. You know, we want to get past simple duality of good and bad, but there is a duality as far as the living entity and the supreme. And our Madhvacharya, who the Sampradaya is named after partially, he helped really unpack that difference between the living entity, the Jiva, and the supreme. And so it's kind of different ways of looking at maybe duality in that fashion. 27 through 28, shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is always in this state is certainly liberated. Being free from desire, fear, and anger. Desire, fear, and anger. Very tough things. You know, very easy to get angry in the drop of a hat. A lot of times it's accompanied by some surprise. You know, a lot of times there's a little bit of surprise that accompanies some of these things. So for people who are trying to be regulated, we have to kind of be ready for surprises. Be ready. Think about how we're going to act. You know, fear versus anger. Fear sometimes is more of a trepidatious staying away thing, and anger is more of a going towards, more of an aggressive act. And so think if you were like, there can be someone that you're like maybe a little fearful of talking to, and but that's a little timid. You know, we don't want to be, he doesn't want us to be timid or fearful to maybe talk to someone who we're really inspired by. So being able to get over our small fears when we know it's for our best. And then anger might come, and someone that maybe we feel like we have a little anger, and maybe it would be better to express the fact that I'm feeling a little anger, and that would at least clue the person in to how the one is feeling, and trying to work on a combination, a balance between fear and anger. Not so scared that we can't talk to the person, but not so aggressive that we're not willing to dispel our anger a little bit. So somewhere in, he's really looking for balance. Krishna is really over and over again looking for balance, and we want to be free from anger. You know, we don't like being angry, we don't like being fearful, and we don't like desiring sense objects. It's kind of obnoxious. It's constant desire for sense objects, and one has to become free from this desire towards sense objects to climb the yogic ladder. These two, there's the beginning of the yoga ladder, the yoga ruruksha. The beginning of the ladder is called the yoga ruruksha stage, and it's only mentioned not very much. These two terms aren't mentioned too often. And then yoga rudha, the highest rung on the ladder, and from Bhagavad Gita 1849, this state of mind is called yoga rudha, or the perfectional stage of yoga, as confirmed in the 3rd chapter. One who is satisfied in himself has no fear of any kind of reaction from his activity. So that's yoga ruruksha and yoga rudha. So everyone say yoga ruruksha, and yoga rudha. So fear and anger get in the way. From the purport here, 27 through 28, this yoga process helps one become free from all kinds of fear and anger, and thus feel the presence of the super soul in the transcendental situation. In other words, Krishna consciousness is the easiest process of executing yoga principles. This will be thoroughly explained in the next chapter. A Krishna conscious person, however, being always engaged in devotional service, does not risk losing his senses to some other engagement. This is a better way of controlling the senses than by Ashtanga yoga. Ashtanga yoga. Zoom question? Okay. Hare Krishna.
Aratosh on Zoom says, Hare Krishna, please accept my humble obeisances. I have something to ask. Some people say, why do you Krishna conscious people preach? I have my own religion. You follow yours. I follow mine. I meet many with such an attitude. How can one handle this?
Yeah. And it's like, we think sometimes, well, aren't we all God's children? Where does the path that's for all of us? Do we have to stay divided into these little groups? Can't we someday wouldn't it be more elevated to eventually arrive at a place where we can all get under the same umbrella and we can all get together and worship together? And or should we keep these divisions? Do we actually like these divisions? And ISKCON is actually trying to, and devotional service, it's actually trying to invite everyone in and saying, yes, try this, give this a shot, and add it to your pre-existing religion. And it's for Mormon people, it's for Christians, it's for everybody. And that's it. And it's one of the only ones I found. That's one of the big reasons I was attracted to this, was it's for everybody. In fact, I remember when I got baptized around age 12, my father reminds me that I said to him, even though I was going to go down that path, I told him, I said, eventually I want to find a religion that's kind of for everybody, that's for the whole world, and him, even though he is a Christian, Sunday school teacher and author, we both agreed that I had found that path with ISKCON, with devotional service. There's so much detail, Hare Krishna. There's so much detail in this philosophy, and for those who like, reading and knowledge, there's so much here. There's so much for everyone, no matter what you enjoy. If you enjoy dancing, feasting, the wonderful community, because how many groups out there don't really have the community, and we don't want to feel like we're out there on our own. We can't do it on our own. In fact, I remember before I came to the temple, to the RBC, I had been following some Vedic teachings for 9 months or so, but I really felt like I was on my own. I felt like, okay, here's a few YouTube people I like, but I really thought, as many of us did, that I had to go to India to like get to the next level. And so I had read the Bhagavad Gita, not Bhagavad Gita as it is, but I still was helped by just a couple of things. One of them is this teaching of acting and letting God, let Krishna take care of the results, and don't be, and that's renunciation, is acting and working, but the fruits of the work, the fruits of the action are renounced, or they're given to Krishna and left up to his hands, his capable hands. And so I knew that, and that helped me a lot, because I was actually getting ready to release a small album, and I didn't feel so great about it. But then when I read that, I was like, oh, that makes me feel so nice. It's just like, don't stress about it anymore. Like, you acted, you tried to make the little whatever, and now you just put it out and let it go. It's kind of a letting go that so many people in the material world, it's this clinging on, whether it's the past or some material attachment. There's a lot of clinging. And imagine remember the child that we see at the grocery store sometimes, that is throwing the fit, because they want some sort of little trinket or piece of candy or something, and we think, oh gosh, I'm glad I'm not that age. I'm glad I'm not going through that anymore. But we are all kind of grown up children, and And a lot of us are going through that still. A lot of people in the material world, there's still this tantrum, there's still this childish mentality, tantrum throwing, and turning their back on God, or anger. When you follow anger to its extreme, because like anything, follow it to its extreme to see what it's really like. What if everybody did this behavior? How would that look in the world? But if we followed anger to its extreme, you end up being kind of angry at everyone. And that's not a fun place to be. And you end up turning your back on God. So there's no end. It's like these insatiable desires, anger and lust. And they kind of go hand in hand. Of course, even sexual lust we can tell through Lord Chaitanya's teachings and Krishna's teachings that is like one of the main things that they do not like. They do not tolerate. And so lust and anger and greed and desire. But just give those people, show them your good side, show them your smile. And if they don't want to chat that day, then you kind of let them go and move on to the next person. But maybe you give them there was this show that we used to watch, he was a detective show. And there would always be one more thing. He was really good at getting to the bottom of the case. And whenever he was talking to the person that would eventually be found out as the perpetrator, he'd always be like, he'd leave and he'd knock on the door. One more thing, one more thing. So sometimes it's kind of like we can look at like sales strategies and, one more thing, or don't go quite yet, or what about this? Or, because we know this could be their last chance or one of their only chances at making spiritual progress. And we're trying to help them do that. So let's remember that it may be their last chance. And so, just, keep that rope out there, as long as you can. And then, but if you have to move on, you have to move on. But just by interacting with you and having that conversation that day, they got some benefit and you got some benefit too. So it's not for null. verse 29. The sages, knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attain peace from the pangs of material miseries. It's said that some people look at the world as like a place for recreation. And some people look at the world and just reject it and say it's evil. But the third class sees the world as a place for reciprocating love with Krishna, a place meant for his service. That's bhakti yoga, and that's balance. So, and then from the purport, the Lord is not partial toward anyone. Everything depends on one's practical performance of duties in an effort to control the senses and conquer the influence of desire and anger. And attaining Krishna consciousness by controlling the above-mentioned passions, one remains factually in the transcendental stage, or Brahman Nirvana. So there's a term, Brahman Nirvana, liberation in the Supreme, or the absence of material miseries due to being constantly immersed in the Supreme. Brahma Nirvana, liberation in the Supreme, versus Brahma Bhuta, self-realized. So similar concepts, but Brahma Nirvana, liberation in the Supreme. I like that sentence. Practical performance of duties in an effort to control the senses and conquer the influence of desire and anger. So these practical performances of duties, why are we doing them? In an effort to control the senses and conquer the influence of desire and anger. So when we do these, when we work in Krishna consciousness, then we're trying to control the senses, and we're working on conquering the influence of desire and anger. So when you're working, just remember, this is helping conquer that desire and anger. that I don't want so much of anymore. I've been down those roads. I don't want that so much anymore. So doing this work, if I can be properly situated, keep Krishna and do this for Krishna, it's going to help me conquer that influence of desire and anger. Srila Prabhupada said once, so Bhagavan, he is the real enjoyer. He is the real enjoyer. The Lord says that I am the enjoyer. Whatever is being done here, I am the enjoyer. And I am the proprietor. So therefore, Boga means enjoyment. The real enjoyer is the Supreme Lord. We are enjoyed. We are not enjoyer. It's like the Lord, I was just imagining this a little bit. It's like the Lord built us, and he built the stage, and he built the concert hall, and he is sitting in the audience, and we are to play and act on the stage for his pleasure. He's also the owner of the theater, but he also likes to enjoy as the audience does sometimes. The performer very often can't see the audience because of the bright lights. Krishna is also the director who taught us how to properly act. So for his pleasure, we have to try to bring all living entities back to Godhead. What do they say in baseball? How do you score a run in baseball? You go back home. You got to go back home. So back home, back to Godhead. That's a home run. I want to go back, but I want all of you all to be there too. I want, that's very important. And maybe that's a good mentality, that, I'm not going back unless you're going back. But chapter 5 makes it clear here that the Lord is the predominator and the living entities are the predominated. To work with this knowledge is karma yoga, or Krishna consciousness, being properly dovetailed, having transcendental knowledge of the super soul. That is the shortcut to liberation. And he explained in that chapter Nishkama Karma Yoga. Chapter 6 goes into greater detail about Ashtanga Yoga. Krishna asserts the importance of not giving up work. We work, but we renounce the fruit. So going on to text 161. The Blessed Lord said, one who is unattached to the fruits of his work and who works as he is obligated in the renounced order of life, and he is the true mystic. Not he who lights no fire and performs no work. So another very famous verse, just like the last one, very famous verse. The sages, knowing me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attain peace from the pangs of material miseries. Srila Prabhupada would quote that verse a lot, as well as 6.1. Sankhya Yoga is the chapter title, and that was given by the true Lord Kapila. That's the analytical study of the nature of spirit and matter, not the false Sankhya given by the false Kapila. So it gets a little confusing, but the Srimad Bhagavatam clears it up. Here's something. It is clearly explained by him that the Purusha, or the Supreme Lord, is active and that he creates by looking over the Prakriti. This is accepted in the Vedas and in the Gita. The description in the Vedas indicates that the Lord glanced over the Prakriti, or nature, and impregnated it with atomic individuals' souls. All these individuals are working in the material world for sense gratification, and under the spell of material energy, they are thinking of being enjoyers. This mentality is dragged to the last point of liberation when the living entity wants to become one with the Lord. This is the last snare of Maya, or sense gratificatory illusion. And it is only after many, many births of such sense gratificatory activities that a great soul surrenders unto Vasudeva, Lord Krishna, thereby fulfilling the search after the ultimate truth. So this merging is the last snare of Maya. And that's, we're not interested in in this merging. And Srila Prabhupada said, but Krishna prescribes that one who works without any expectation or of result or reward, then why does he work? Karyam, quote, it is my duty, it is my duty. Not with a result, but as duty. Quote, I am duty bound to this. In such a way, if somebody works, he is actually in the renounced order of life. Text 2. What is called renunciation is the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. For no one can become a yogi unless he renounces the desire for sense gratification. So in this text, Krishna is saying what is called renunciation is the same as yoga, or linking oneself with the Supreme. So we must not only restrain the senses, but we must renounce the internal desires for sense gratification. So not only restraining the senses, but just renouncing and squashing any sort of internal desires for sense gratification. Real sannyas yoga or bhakti means that one should know his constitutional position as a living entity and act accordingly. And then he actually said somewhere, so just like you have got a staircase to rise up to the 5th or 6th or 10th floor, that whole staircase or whole stair lift is called yoga. Now, somebody may be in the 5th floor, somebody may be in the 10th floor, somebody may be on the 50th floor, but the same lift service is going. You take the lift service as the yoga, connection between the highest story to the down. Anyone who has elevated himself to a certain platform, someone is called karma yogi, someone is called jnana yogi, someone is called dhyana yogi, someone is called bhakti yogi. So there are different kinds of yoga in this conception. Otherwise, this lift service, yoga service, is the same. It is. The difference is between the elevation point. So similarly, you can, Arjuna, you can understand that what is sannyas and what is yoga, they are the same principle. They're the same principle. How? Because without being freed from desires of sense gratification, nobody can become either a yogi or a sannyasi. So both schools are trying to become free from desires of sense gratification. Everyone is trying to have some profit out of his activities. There are many yogi. They perform yoga system or teach yoga system for some profit, but that is not the idea of yoga system. Everything should be engaged in the service of the Lord. Everything. Whatever we do, either as ordinary worker or as sannyasi or as yogi or as jnani, all our energies should be dovetailed with Krishna consciousness. That is real sannyas. That is real yoga. And Ashtanga yoga is considered a step in the right direction, but there's ways to, there's quicker ways, there's shortcuts, and just quickly from purport 4, he says, without Krishna consciousness, one must be always seeking self-centered or extended selfish activities. So keep showing the face of Krishna to people, and keep saying the name and letting them hear the name and say the name. And it's like the fish bring up their offspring by looking at them, and the tortoise brings up their offspring by meditating on them. Same way, we will meditate on the Supreme and realize the ultimate goals, realize the ultimate goal. We're almost out of time, but any questions or comments? Hare Krishna. All right. Thank you so much. Bhagavad Gita as it is. Ki Jai. Hare